The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of The Wheel of Time Season 1, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in this streaming Amazon show. Joining me today on the panel are Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
Howdy, Dom.
Shelley Kelly. Hi, Shelley.
Hi, Dom.
I got your name right this time on take two. And Thomas Centerho. Hey, Thomas.
It's great to be here.
Folks, be sure to follow The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, in your favorite podcast app, or at the StarQuest Media YouTube channel, where you should also make sure to hit the bell to get notifications. And I want to first, before we get to our topic, I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy, called The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss all of Star Trek, from the original series, animated, movies, TNG, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Picard, and, you know, everything that's coming to Prodigy, Lower Decks. There's so much Star Trek to discuss. Father Corey and Jimmy Aiken and I talk about it all. Check it out wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/trek. All right, but here we're talking about The Wheel of Time. This is a series on Amazon that is based on Robert Jordan's 14-book series. And we'll talk a little bit about the books in a second, but I kind of want to lay the groundwork of what the Wheel of Time is, like the world is. It's kind of hard to describe. You'll understand why it's hard to describe. So this, I pulled this off of Wikipedia. Okay, so bear with me because it's got all of the Wikipedia perhaps problems. But here, you can tell me if it gets it right. At the dawn of time, a deity known as the Creator forged the universe and the Wheel of Time, which spins the pattern of the ages using the lives of men and women as its threads. The wheel has 7 spokes, each representing an age, and as it is rotated by the one power, which is the source of magic, which flows from the true source. The one power is divided into male and female halves, called Sidin and Sidar, which work in opposition and in unison to drive the wheel. The wheel is like the world. You know, just keep that in mind. Humans who can use its power are known as channelers. The principal organization of such channelers in the books is called the Aes Sedai, or Servants of All in the Old Tongue. In history, the Aes Sedai accidentally let the Dark One, the devil, out of his prison, and so the wheel spun out, created the person known as the Dragon, who had the ultimate channeling power, to fight him as a champion for the light. But when the Dragon defeated the Dark One, all the male channelers were infected, so that using the power drives them insane. And so they're all male channelers must be hunted down and dealt with. Is that about right? Is that kind of set the stage for the story that begins?
More or less.
More or less. It's so hard to say yes to that.
It's kind of funny listening to someone who's never read the series talk about summarize the world.
So that's one thing I want to point out. So I have only seen the show, the 8-episode first season, but all 3 of you have read more or less the books. Has anyone read them all?
No. Shelley, you and I are both, we've kind of gone about the same point about book 10, book 11, I want to say.
I got to the last book written by Robert Jordan in its
11.
entirety, which was Knife of Dreams in 2005. So that there's 3 books after that he had left extensive notes for before his death and were finished by a different author.
Brandon Sanderson is a fantastic author. So anyone who hasn't finished the series, definitely go finish the series. Don't say it's not Robert Jordan, so it can't be the same, because Sanderson is amazing. And I've heard from people that have read it that he did a really great job.
I've heard the same.
Yeah. So we should, so, and there's not just, are there the 14 books, And by the way, Robert Jordan's initial intent was to do it in 12 books. So he wrote up to the 11th book, and he was working on the 12th book. And there's a quote that you can find on the wiki where he was going to publish it in one last book, even if it was like 1,500 pages, or you had to have a library cart to wheel it around. He was going to finish it in this last book. And Brandon Sanderson went to Tor and his widow and said, that's not going to happen.
Right.
And that's why we got the three last books. So there are 14 main books. There's also a prequel where we learn how we learn about the birth of
the world,
Rand al'Thor.
Yeah. Oh,
we learned that backstory. We learned about Moraine, the Aes Sedai, and her warder, how they met. So there's more that kind of fill in kind of the blanks. That's not really considered the mainline story, but it's kind of like the prequel to the story. Right. Oh, she's got the
and don't forget, there's lots of compendiums to try and summarize books for you.
Right, and to sum up all of the knowledge that are on wikis too.
Yeah. Well, those predate the wikis.
Right.
Yeah. And we got to make sure to say too that unlike another author, George R.R. Martin, Robert Jordan, the only reason why he didn't finish his series is because he died.
Well, George Martin is
kind of worried that's going to. Yeah, I was going to say I don't know that Martin's not going to fit that bill either. Yeah, I read up until the 5th book, so I got to the 5th book 3 times. I've read the first 5 books 3 times, and I keep trying to give this series I want to like it. I really want to like it. I love the concepts. If you put a list of all of the things that I should like on a piece of paper, this one checks a majority of them. The problem is that it's just, I can't stand a majority of the characters. and he has like 30 some odd characters that you're following through the course of everything that's going on. Mm-hmm. And you get a whole chapter devoted to that character because they split up and go all over different parts of the world. And so eventually you get to the point where, like, I only liked one character. Honestly, I only liked Matt by the 5th book. And he had very few chapters, and I would literally skip some of the characters' chapters because I just did not care about them at all.
Okay. Well, I have news for you, Tom. If some of those, he devotes a whole book, 800 pages, to only 1 or 2 characters. Yeah. So I'll have to look up which one is Matt's, and you can just jump ahead.
There you go. Just skip it. Skip that book, and that's it.
Well, there's something like 12,500 pages worth of the Wheel of Time series.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Including the prequel. So if you might happen to see online where people are complaining, well, they cut this out, they cut that out of this series we're talking about now, TV series. There's a reason for it. The first book's 900 pages.
Yeah.
Right.
And when you start reading one after he had, after one had come out, and then you wait a year or two and you start reading the new one, you can't remember who half the characters are.
Yes,
so you have to go back to the one before that, but you can't remember those either. So then you go back to the one, and before you know it, you're reading the first 5 books again already. So
right. So I do want to point out, for anyone who hasn't read all the books, we're going to try to avoid spoiling anything that doesn't happen in the first season, because I would be really mad if you spoil anything that hasn't already been in the first season. So I hate spoilers, but no, we're going to try to keep as much as we can to the spoilers. We could talk about overall things, but if we can avoid the direct spoiling of things.
And I want to throw in a disclaimer here that we don't know what the second season is going to cover. And it's possible there are things that we'll mention kind of as we're going through here that are in the books that are not in the first season that may come up in the next, that will possibly come up in the second season. So we're going to try not to spoil people, but.
Well, then I would like to point out before we get too far off the books side of things.
Well, I want to stay on the books for a bit. Okay.
It's really important to point out that this is a great series in the sense that what it does is it kind of establishes itself in the reality. And then by the end of this series, it is not the books anymore. It is very clearly not the books. It says we're not going to follow the exact same path that the books had, but the concepts are very well handled. And that's one of the things that I think was really good with this whole show, is that they handled the overall story really well. And they took a lot of the fluff that it kind of took Robert Jordan, I think, 3 or 4 books to figure out about his characters, and just put it in this one and said, let's go ahead and start that plot line because it's worthwhile.
So where does the televised version diverge from the books? Like where does the big split happen? I mean, is it from the beginning? Is it in the concept? Like I've seen in the books that the primary character is Rand.
Yes.
And he's again, I'm spoiling the what we've seen in the TV series in the streaming series. I'm going to spoil that he's the dragon. Okay, but early on, there's a question of one of these 5 people is the dragon. Was that the same way in the book series?
No, it was 3. Okay, there were 3 Ta'veren, and those were the 3 boys. Egwene and Nynaeve were not secondary characters, but they weren't being considered as potential dragons. They were immediately recognized for their ability to touch the source and be the most powerful Aes Sedai that they've ever seen, or that the wheel has ever spun out. So.
And Shelley mentioned the word Ta'veren, and that is a very important concept in this, because the 3 of them, they're threads that are always linked in the pattern. As the wheel spins, these are threads that are always together.
Okay.
So when it was, the dragon way back, he had his 2 buddies that were always with him, and now they've been spun out as Mat and Perrin. Okay.
So I want to come back to that, because that's an important thing. I want a concept in this I want to address. But it is interesting that, in the concept of the show, men wielding the power, the one power, men channeling, as they call it, is bad because of the whole crazy thing. And that's why, but that's the dragon. It's intimately connected to being the dragon as being a guy. And that they felt like when they made a show out of it, they had to instead, do you think it was, political correctness? We need to have like the girls be considered just as much as the boys? I mean, is it because it felt weird.
And to be fair, I mean, the only one that was different that they considered who could have been the dragon was Egwene.
Okay.
Egwene.
Nynaeve just kind of basically tracked them to catch up with them later.
And that's in the book too, not the tracking, but that she catches up after the battle.
Mm-hmm. So. Yep. Yeah, after the battle. Of course, in the book, they spend much more time in the 2 rivers, and that's where she catches up with them and stuff like that. It wasn't like this where, they were gone for, months, and all of a sudden she catches up with them type of deal.
I think it starts like the book, doesn't it, Thomas?
It does. It starts almost exactly like it skips the prologue, which is significant. And I think it was a good choice on their part to just kind of start in the dark. And the prologue is seeing the former dragon and what he did and how he broke the world, basically.
Which
I
gets
think
explained.
That's added as a bonus in season 1. That's a bonus feature.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, is it? Okay. Because they do go back to Luz Theromin, the old dragon, as kind of a flashback right before it happens.
Right. But they don't actually show the fallout. And I think that I like the way the book puts that prologue in, because it gives you this really weird sense of what's of what we're looking back at when we're constantly talking about the male Aes Sedai and the madness that they go through, because he writes the madness incredibly well. It was very well written and very clear in that scene. But yeah, it starts off with Tam and Rand coming into town, and that's pretty much
party time.
How the book starts.
Right. Yeah.
It's, the Beltane, which is their spring festival.
I would say too that with the girls, I think that it's some of the way that they approach the prophecy aspect in the show is good, because it removes this very clear knowledge that everybody has about who's who and what's what, and allows us to explore it more. In the books, it's like they almost know, like you can like look at a person, and when they exhibit a certain power, it's like, oh, well, you're just like this hero from ages gone past. And that's kind of cheap, because then you know what that person is, and you've boxed that person in. The turn of that is that's one of the main themes of the main characters, is that they are always trying to escape being that same person. They want to be themselves, especially Rand. Rand is very belligerent about the fact that he is Rand, not Luz Theron Reborn.
And that's a key concept in this. It's that time is cyclical, the wheel of time, and the events of history repeat over and over. And it's basically a Buddhist or Taoist philosophy, this yin yang duality, the importance of balance, kind of like Star Wars and the Force. But also reincarnation is an important element in this. And that's from a Christian point of view, of course. I mean, it's a fantasy world, so, whatever, we'll take the fantasy, but that's not a thing. God doesn't recycle souls. Every individual is a unique person, and we're not bound by the past lives or anything like that has come out of these sorts of things. But just thought it would be interesting to kind of mention that from our point of view, from a Christian point of view, that is not a thing, that every individual is created from nothing.
Now, you said that this is a fantasy world, but if you believe Robert Jordan, we're actually in the first age, and this is occurring in the third age, that this is actually Earth.
Right.
In like the way future.
Right. And it's weird because it's all sort of medieval looking, how Hollywood sees medieval looking or Middle Earthy sort of Tolkien sort of thing.
How the books are written too.
Yeah.
Is it's kind of a medieval technology.
Right.
And we don't know how long each age is.
Right. Well, I saw a reference to like 3,000 years between the first dragon and the current events. And the thing we see in the near the end of the first season is, like you mentioned, we see the first dragon and about to go confront the Dark One. And we're shown a world that is, and I like the subtlety of the way they show it as someone who didn't know what to expect. Because the first thing I noticed was the clothes are much finer. They're well sewn and threaded and finer fabrics. The furniture is finer. The architecture looks really nice. And then we get a shot out the window and we see flying vehicles. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is the past, but the world was broken. And therefore the world had descended into this, this brokenness. And you could see
almost back to the Stone Age.
Right.
After it breaking.
Yeah. So I really like that part of it.
And that's a concept that will keep coming up through as we get more and more flashes. Again, assuming they follow the books, more and more flashes from the past, where you'll see that concept of humanity fell technologically big time.
Right.
When the breaking happened.
Wow. Okay. So, so there's that. So there's that duality. But there's also this concept of there's a creator called the Light, and then there's the Dark One, which I think even uses a name for the Dark One.
They call him Shaitan, which
is an Arabic word for the devil. That's basically the Arabic word for devil. So it was interesting that it's a world that has beliefs and has a religious system. It treats, it's one of the things that it's interesting about a lot of fantasy stories is that there are, concepts of religion. There's a god or gods or good versus evil, and it's sort of built into the system, which I wonder, is that Tolkien? Because I mean, everything pretty much written after 1935 pretty much is derivative of Lord of the Rings, in my point of view. Anything written in the modern world. And I wonder if that's his worldview. Kind of, it's always these fantasy, magic, sword and sorcery sort of things is a battle of good versus evil, and that's fundamental.
I wonder how much of that, though, is just because that is a theme that's recurred in literature going back even to the Middle Ages. You read literature from back then. And I think that part of the reason why we compare it to Tolkien is such a massive influence on fantasy going forward from him. It's like saying, well, this band sounds like the Beatles. Well, that's because the Beatles were such a massive influence on rock music going forward.
Right. I would say too that it's one of those things that I think a lot of people, when they're trying to write medieval fiction, tend to think, oh, well, everybody was so simple. They explained things by the gods. And the few places that it is escaped, I believe the David Eddings' Belgariad avoids the use of gods. And they're kind of, it's more of like things are explained by magic. The magic is the explainer and then becomes the technology that they end up using. And so there are exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, I think that's why it gets thrown in and it's funny because it's a religious flaw, the God of the gaps, right? Where you're trying to explain things and you can't, so you just say God did it. And that's not actually a proper theological process. You don't ever do that.
Right.
It's literally a Deus ex machina, God in the machine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Michael Moorcock might be another example of that. I think his elf, what's his name? Elric series, I think also.
Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I read that, so I'm not getting, don't hold me to that. Shelley, were you going to have a point there as well on that?
Oh, just to say that to the best of my knowledge, Robert Jordan was influenced by Tolkien.
Of course.
Who wasn't. And if memory serves, the world that Robert Jordan created was considered like the first best new world building that didn't follow Tolkien's world, but actually created such a massive scale new world on its own. And that's what made it stand out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That in 800-page books.
Yeah.
I was going to say Tolkien did it in 3.
Yeah, he did.
Jordan 14.
He's the master.
3 smaller books.
I have a shelf full of his writings that would dispute that. It's just 3 that were published as one story, and then all of the stuff his son published.
Oh, yeah.
There's everything else, right?
Well, and then there was The Hobbit, the prequel.
Yeah.
There were notes. Everything else was notes.
Yes, that's true. That is true.
Yeah.
One thing I would point out, I don't want to make this about Tolkien, but is Tolkien's influence extends to sort of the concept of a Dark Lord. My wife Melanie, who is she was an English literature professor before we got married, but so she was pointing out that wasn't a thing in literature. Like in medieval literature, they had magic. There was Morgan Le Fay and that sort of thing. You had people with magic, but there wasn't a idea of the singular figure who had who represented evil that had to be defeated, and so that could be a part of that influence you see here as well, which is interesting. Anyway, it's an interesting comparison, and we have to compare everything to Tolkien in the fantasy genre, I guess.
Well, I think that's one of the things that this series does really well is it falls back to those archetypes, right? Where there is good, there is evil. Yes, there is internal struggle to the heroes, but the heroes are heroes, and that's kind of that's one of the markers that I will say for this series that makes it a really good read, because you're not going to get into like a really super devolved conversation about, well, what is good, what is evil. There's a very clear good and a very clear evil present.
Oh, okay.
And the avoidance of the temptation to evil is present in all of the characters. They all have to fight against the easy way out. And that's the way evil is often represented, is that it's the easy way. It's the way to get things faster and to advance more quickly in your art, in whatever you're doing. So that's a great, it's a great moral tale. I will say that. And there are some that muddy the waters. If you're talking about George Martin, going back to that, he muddies the waters about what's right and what's wrong constantly. And so you never really know where you stand with any of the characters. With this series, you do. You know who the good guys are. You know who the bad guys are. And when the good guys make bad decisions, you feel it, and it kind of wrenches your guts, and they feel it too.
And that's the other thing too, is there are good guys and bad guys, and the good guys aren't perfect. There are no Mary Sues in these characters at all. And so, even Randall Thor, who's the savior, the dragon, et cetera, he makes bad mistakes. He goes crazy, frankly. He's get his time too. So it's they're more, like I said, morally right and wrong, but that doesn't mean they're perfect.
Well, that's an interesting point. So how do you think the show does it? I got to figure out the right terminology. How does the show do with that? Does it keep the clear distinction of good versus evil, or does it muddy the waters, do you think? Because from my point of view, some of these characters seem to walk a line, like Moraine, I think, does. And the Aes Sedai. That's in my notes. Are the Aes Sedai the good guys? Because
and that's the question in the books.
Right.
That's very much a question.
Maybe some are and some aren't. But
I was going to say it's not a monolithic thing. That's you can't take the whole group as a whole. But each character does have their moments, and we have seen some of the darker parts of the characters pulled forward in this show versus the books. Perrin's a great example. In the books, he does not have a wife at the beginning. There's none of this, like he murdered his wife, and that's why that's not present at all.
Oh wow!
And Brandon Sanderson, he wrote as the series was in production. Like, I told him get rid of that. I told him if he wanted it, what he thought is if they had to have where Perrin killed someone, kill Master Lucan, who he's apprenticing under.
Mm-hmm. The blacksmith.
The blacksmith.
Yeah. Who isn't in the show. Mm-hmm. Was he?
No.
I think he was mentioned. I think he was mentioned once, but that was about it. But it was, they added, and the character actually does come from the book. At one point, I guess Perrin, I don't remember it, but Perrin said, if we had stayed in the Two Rivers, I probably would have married this girl.
Oh, okay. And so they just made. I'm curious. I mean, I guess it gives him an arc of the self doubt and that sort of thing. And it gives a way for evil to work on him.
They wanted to age them too. They wanted them older. They were supposed to be 16, 17. I think Nynaeve was supposed to be 19, early 20s.
Oh, okay.
But by aging them, they're all over 18. They're all old enough to parents married. And see, when I first started watching this series, that was a big turnoff for me. The way that they changed the beginning. Rand walking with his father, that was good. But then when they did the whole women's council and the braid and the river, I thought, okay, well, that's all right. And then when they introduced Perrin and Matt's pretty true, but Perrin was just way off. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? So
Perrin is probably the furthest from the book character then?
In the beginning.
Yes. In the beginning.
Yeah.
I will say though, the way they handled the women, and this is something Thomas, you and I kind of talked about on offline, where some concerns about kind of how the women are cast, and it's like, have you read the books lately?
Which I hadn't. It's been a while.
Right.
The women of Two Rivers basically come across as bullies in the books. Towards the men. I mean, it's pretty bad. And you see a little of that where, of course, Tam and Rand come in, Tam Althor, Rand's foster father, come into town. And of course, all the women are like, oh, you need to come talk to this person. They're trying to get Tam set up with, and both Tam and Rand set up with women, for getting married. And in the book, it's much more explicit. It's like, no, we got so-and-so coming to visit. You need to come over for supper tonight. And, that kind of deal. And then Nynaeve, they tamed her big time in this, I think.
Really? Because
in the book, she's literally walking around with a Switch looking for guys who are causing trouble.
She gets mad.
And not a Nintendo Switch.
Something they do it a couple of times in the series where she like grabs her braid. In the book, she's constantly tugging on her braid because she's mad about something and just like hauling on it because she's trying to keep herself in check.
Yes.
She's tugging on the braid with one hand and she's got a stick in another that she's going to go smack some men.
Okay, because the character in the show, she does come across as kind of angry, like kind of a little defensive, angry at the world a little bit. Sort of a grouch.
She was orphaned at a young age. She was apprenticed to the wisdom. She's the youngest wisdom they've ever had. So she's constantly trying to assert her authority over these older men and women. The women accept her. The men have to fear her a little bit. And in the show, I think they did a decent job of showing how protective she was of these four coming from her village. These are my responsibility, and I will bring them home safely.
And she does have an axe to grind with Moraine.
But yes. So she has a major role. I mean, that's true to her character, that defensive stature.
Okay. And does she, end up in a relationship with Lan, and is that from the books as well?
Not in the first book.
Okay.
Not in the first book.
It's
like the fourth book.
We got a lot
before that goes
further in the book before this happens. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But they did a good job developing the chemistry between them.
Yes.
I mean, they really, you felt it in the book, but even though it was rushed for the show, it worked.
I really liked this concept that they have of the warder for the Aes Sedai, this guy who was pledged, but not necessarily romantic to the woman that he's protecting. And but there's a bond that goes beyond simply an employee. But there's like a spiritual, magical bond of some sort.
They're emotionally connected.
Yes.
Yeah. That's one thing they did. I'm going to say this. They did a good job of introducing a lot of concepts without just flat out doing the Star Trek. We're going to tell you everything about it.
Standing at consoles talking. Yes.
Yeah. And that was one of them where I think the first time they hinted that there was a connection between the warder and the Aes Sedai is when Lan had been drinking and Moraine is all touchy-feely and emotional. And he said, you get emotional whenever I drink.
Right. Right.
And they just kind of hint right there that there's a connection, that what the warder feels, the Aes Sedai feels, and vice versa.
Except she can mask it. She can mask so he doesn't know, which is interesting. They had this. I have heard that this relationship between Moraine and the what's it called? The Amarylline seat.
Amarylline seat. Suan
is
Amarylline seat.
Siwan Sanche.
Okay.
Yep.
That's not in the books, right?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought
Not,
now,
I don't remember it being so
much
graphic.
yeah.
I think it was more implied.
Okay.
He's not a George R.R. Martin. They're pillow friends. Is the phrase that they would use.
I see. Yeah. I was a little disappointed that the series it doesn't get like full on explicit, but it broadly tells you what's going on.
You know what? We were, Alicia and I were really disappointed in that, not because of the scene itself. I don't really mind that kind of stuff. But what happens later is that she tells the story of how she's talking with Rand towards the end of the show, and tells how she learned how to be, how to use magic. And it was by her mentor coming into her room at night and basically abusing her. And when you put that in context of what was happening with her and Suan, it's just, that's not okay. Like there's all sorts of levels of that's not okay anymore. And that was what really bothered us.
Yeah, that does actually, because it implies something to the audience that that is not good. Yeah, you're right.
Well, then, and it also tears down the relationship that you're creating between Moraine and the Amarylline seat, because now the question is, is that a result of her abuse? Like, is that just so now you've taken this thing that you were trying to say is like normal and fine and whatever, and you've put it in this light of, well, has she been abused? And that's why she's, responding in this way. Is this all still part of that same dynamic for her?
And the prequel book does talk about how when Moraine and Suan were both apprentices, novices at the same time, that they did have a novice mistress who was abusive, who would go in and, switch them if they couldn't. And again, in the book later on, you see that with Nynaeve. But I don't think they're going to have that here, because in the book, she's blocked from the source until she gets mad. Nynaeve could not channel until she would get upset. But I did want to mention with the Amarylline seat, did she look familiar, Dom?
Yes, she was Queen Elizabeth in, or what they call her, Liz 10. Liz 10 in Doctor Who, the Britain's space whale.
Yep.
It was the first regular episode with the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith, and Amy Pond. Yeah.
So she went from playing the Queen of England to the head of the Aes Sedai.
And did any of you who read the book think that her character was cast differently than you envisioned it when you read the books?
Yeah.
Because there were some characters that I was like, oh, that's spot on.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were a few that I was like, wait, that's not
she's
right.
supposed to be, and they show it in a flashback, but Siwan's supposed to be the daughter of a fisherman, and a fisherman herself.
Mm-hmm. And I always got the impression it was more, I'll say Vietnamese, more of an Asian background.
Yeah,
that's definitely how I would have cast it.
Yeah, I can see that. Lan was spot on. I will say that. Lan was amazing.
Moraine was spot on to me, too.
The only problem I have with Moraine, in the book, she's about a foot shorter than Lan.
Mm-hmm.
She's like petite, tiny, small, and Lan's just towering over her. In this, they're a couple inches difference. Other than that, no, you're right.
So good.
Yeah, Rosamund Pike is good, and Daniel Henney as Lan. I thought, what a great character! I just love the character of Lan. It's I think might be my favorite character, because there's something sort of regal about him, which is subtle.
Very fitting.
Well, that's the thing I love is they don't tell you. Well, they tell you at the end of the series that he comes from a royal family of a kingdom that's no longer. So it's that I like how they. Family. Yes, I like. You're hinting at things. The spoilers to me. That's okay. But I like that the subtle way that he plays it, so that when we get this reveal, it makes sense. You're like, oh, okay, all right,
and he played the opening so well, because that is Lan's character, is he does not open up to you until he trusts you, and then it gradually comes out, and that's where you start to see where he starts, being a little more open and free with not just Nynaeve but all of them, willing to express himself.
I think he was my favorite in the books too.
Mm-hmm.
I liked
Definitely
Moraine, and we have not gotten enough of Tom, the Gleeman. I mean,
oh no.
I don't know, but are they
not exploring this at all? They've got to bring it back.
I don't think they're gonna take him though. I think they ran his course right there because that was really
that was the pits because he's one of the great characters.
Wonderful. I mean,
so there's this whole series in the first book. Yeah, there's this whole series in the first book where Rand and Matt, that whole series where they're separated, they have to learn to survive. Like they have to make it on their own, basically. And Tom helps them. Tom teaches them how to be Gleeman. And then they lose Tom at basically in a similar way. And then they have to go off and make it on their own to get to Tar Valon and come back together with the team, right? And so there's like this whole series there that was really absent from the book that I'm interested how they're going to come back with that because that plays a role in the next few books in a very big way.
Huh.
So we'll see.
You're right, because as someone who hadn't read the books, I'm thinking this character that we've introduced is very interesting. I want to learn more about him. And then suddenly he's gone. And I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. Like it must be a book thing. But, it's like it's a character that they wrote for the series really well. I mean, because it showed a lot of promise, a lot of interesting, a lot of potential depth there. Well, maybe they're going to figure out a way to bring him back, I guess. But
I mean, it's possible that they're gonna figure out some way to introduce him back in on more because he becomes a fairly significant figure going forward.
Is there any news how many seasons they're potentially hoping to make?
They got renewed for a second.
They've already got a second, but yeah, they haven't.
That's all I know.
Yeah, they didn't say how long. Yeah.
And I can't see them doing one season per book. I can see them, starting because we know they're going to do the second book, which is the Great Hunt, the Hunt for the Horn, because they've already set that up.
Right.
Yeah.
But beyond that,
right.
Well,
right.
I hope that they're careful with the way they do it because and going from talking about Tom who didn't have enough screen time to the Lord Egelmar and Lady Amelissa in the end. And that last thing with the battle at Tarwin's Gap and her like channeling and drawing the other women into that's not in the books at all.
Okay.
And so it was very confusing to me. And my wife made a good point. She said that was probably the most interesting female character that they had in the whole series to her. Like she really just attached to her, loved the concept of her. And was super upset that they didn't explore any of that. Like they just kind of laid it out there. And she was like, why is her relationship with her brother so messed up? What is the situation in this town that this is okay? Like she wanted a million questions answered about that character that just kind of dropped. And that's because they really did alter that character for the show and gave her a much bigger role in part of the story that wasn't written. And so I'm worried that's the one thing that concerns me about this show going forward is that's their big moment to shine where they said second to last episode, you know what, whatever you know about the books, forget it. We're not going to do it. And then the last episode is like nothing from the books at all. Pretty much. Yeah. And so, yeah.
Do you think they were maybe trying to take a page out of the whole, what was the Two Rivers called before in the other age? Menethrin?
Possibly.
And it's in the extras. It's in the bonus content if you're watching on Amazon Prime. The story. And Moraine tells them the story as they're singing that. Oh, that was beautiful. Singing the song long ago. And she tells them about how he held on for 3 days, 10 days. Help didn't come. And then the wife, the queen, went out and did that. And she used so much of the power that she burnt up and was destroyed. Right. But she protected all the children and their minders. And so they came out to a broken and nothing world and rebuilt. But obviously the old blood, the old legend still runs as stories in the Two Rivers. So when you say that, I'm wondering if maybe they're trying to use that element of that strong woman protecting and place that inside a later episode.
I would have liked a reminder of that just previous to it. I think that would have, I agree. I think that would have wrapped it up really nicely.
And one thing they did show, and we saw it before as well, is that those who can channel the power can link. Again, the good thing they did of, showing, not telling, of they can link and increase the amount of power they're using because they can all draw power. And that's where you see them in that scene where they're all linked together and they're fighting the Trollocs, and people are dropping. They're burning out, literally. I mean, burning out from the power. And again, doing a good job saying you can pull too much power and burn yourself, literally.
And good show not tell about the Angreal. Moiraine's is the blue stone that she wears on her forehead. She shows it to, who does she show it to? Egwene, I think, when she's trying to teach her how to channel. And then she gives one to Rand. And I could not remember if that was in the book, if she gave him the Angreal that early.
Yeah, I can't remember for that one either. I know now the pendant that she was wearing on her head is a focus point for her. So sometimes women, when they're channeling, they need to focus on something to get comfortable with channeling. And that was her focus point, was that pendant.
Then that's what it was. I just remember that's why she wears it.
She was showing that to Egwene as, saying here, to help learn how to channel, you have to learn how to focus it. And this is how I would do it. It was this.
I thought that was a great tie-in where she's telling her focus and there's nothing but the river. There's nothing but the water flowing. And in the very beginning of episode 1, Nynaeve pushes her into the water and says, trust the river.
Which by the way, that becomes important for how men channel, because it's very different. They're not just trust the river, they're fight the river.
Okay. That yin yang thing.
Yep.
So the Sangral, this stone, is the word is the same as the word that is used, the holy blood. It's used of the Holy Grail. That's actually, the where the Grail comes from is from Sangral. I find that very interesting. So the stone is kind of a Holy Grail talisman sort of thing.
Yeah, the idea of it is it's an object from the Age of Legends, from the time of the first dragon. And there's Angrel, Sangrel, and then Terrangrel we'll see eventually, probably in the next season. But the Angrel are weaker than the Sangrel. And so, but they're objects that can help you channel more of the force, more of the force. I was wondering which was going to slip up. I think it was going to be me. But anyways,
I didn't do it.
More of the power.
Okay.
But it helps them to channel more of the one power than they can do on their own.
Magnifier.
Yeah.
But it also protects them. They aren't going to burn up as long as they have one.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
But very much like the concept of a chalice, where it spills to overflowing and you use the overflowing power. Like, it's even described very much that way.
Okay. So Thomas, you said something that they pretty much follow the books up to the last episode and then go off the rails, so to speak, from the books. What's different? What is in this last episode that isn't part of the books?
So in the books, everybody arrives at that last city together, including Matt. Matt's with them. And then they all go from there into the Blight. And there's no separation of anybody there. They still don't know who the Dragon Reborn is. I think by that point, I don't think Moiraine even knows. I think she has a lot of an idea, but she doesn't know. They all travel to the Eye of the World. There's some really interesting, weird stuff that happens there. And Rand is kind of taken into this alternate reality, very similarly to this. And we're introduced to a whole slew of characters that we're not sure, as readers who are watching the show, we're not sure if they exist or not at this point. So there's this group of characters called the Forsaken, who were like the Dark One's closest groupies. And they end up kind of tricking Rand into believing that they are the Dark One, and then try and pull him away and do very similar to what happens in the last episode. But it's the cronies, not the Dark One himself. And Rand figures out how to kill them cleverly, and it kind of shows his power and his creativity in that moment. So it's very different than what ends up happening here. And then when they leave, it's not the sense that they're going to separate and never see each other again and like try and go their own way and be forced back together. So it really does break from the books in a very big way.
Exactly. And one of the biggest ones is right at the end where Moiraine is cut off from the source. That is not in the books at all.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know where they're going with that. Now again, in the books, there are points where people being cut off from the source are healed. And I don't know if that's where they're going to end up with. I don't know.
So well, it's the parallels to The Witcher are very interesting too. Because
it's okay. I'm sitting here wondering if J.K. Rowling read this.
I'm sure she probably did.
Oh my gosh, there's like little things. I'm like, oh, don't say it. Don't say it.
Yep.
And then the Horn of Valere, which is stolen by the Dark Friends. Interesting concept. It can summon the greatest warriors of history, so therefore steal it away. I'm going to guess that's Chekhov's horn. They'll show up again.
Oh yes. Well, that's like the next book is called The Great Hunt.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and it's the hunt for the horn.
So that will probably be a big element in the next season of the show. Then
most likely.
Okay.
Yeah. It's an important artifact that plays into the future story.
But like I said, I'm really interested where Matt is. Where is Matt in all of this? Because he did not separate from the group at this point. And it's like, no, darn it.
Yeah, why would they do that? I mean, I get it because they're showing him tainted by the dagger at Shadar Lagoth, but it's like, come on, guys. But if you want to go there, we're missing an entire city and like 5 major characters that they've got to introduce in a future season, which we won't go into. But I love that they brought in Loyal. I mean, so early, and I'm not going to say I'd forgotten about him, but when he showed up, I was like, oh, that's right.
Loyal is the sort of giant guy, the big.
Yeah, he's
the
Ogier.
Ogier, which is like ogre.
Ogier. However, I do struggle with the pronunciations of some of the words, but yeah, and he's in the first book. They meet him at the city that hasn't been mentioned yet in the book. Instead, they moved him to Tarvalon instead.
Okay.
Well, then Min was elsewhere too, right? Min was much earlier.
Berlon, I think, which was early in the book. But it worked the way they introduced her, so I hadn't really.
I couldn't
remember if she was in Baldara or not.
The
was she
future seer, the one that we could see.
Well, that's where they found her in this. Anyways.
Yeah. Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's the one who could the
bartender.
prophetess. Yeah. The
She
bartender
can see
prophet.
the auras.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's going to be interesting.
So, I don't want to finish without talking about another major element in this, which is the Tinkers that Perrin and Egwene connect with. They're kind of pacifists, and they follow something called the Way of the Leaf, which they say the leaf lives its appointed time and does not struggle against the wind that carries it away. The leaf does no harm and finally falls to nourish new leaves. So it should be with all men and women. So basically, it's an extreme pacifism philosophy. And we see that
I would
in the
say
book.
it's not even so much pacifism as it's the wind blows where the wind blows. We go wherever, it's just in a Christian viewpoint, we would say it would be an extreme trust in the will of God.
Okay.
God wills it, or as Islam says it, Allah wills it,
inshallah. Yeah.
Since we're going with the Buddhist tradition, this might be a very Tao perspective of the world, like not taking what comes and not being, not fighting it, not resisting the way that the world turns.
Right. I mean, you could see this in like sort of even like St. Francis or St. Dominic, the mendicant way, which is just to go out and whatever comes, wherever the food comes from, and sort of being just open to the Holy Spirit leading. The Spirit blows where the Spirit wills, and if I'm a leaf on the wind, watch me soar. Sorry, bringing in a little Firefly too soon.
Too early.
Wash.
Too early.
It's always too soon. Always too soon.
Always too soon for wash. Spoilers.
I will say that is a philosophy that's going to come up very much more, and it is very interesting the way that it is dealt with. And I don't want to say too much more because I don't want to spoil anything.
But it's a great
and the way where it comes from and where it's connected to.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
It might actually, depending on, because they made it clear, at least I think they made it clear that Rand is going to the Ale Waste next.
Oh, well,
which is
and
so this could come up actually in the next season.
I thought they introduced the Ale very, very well with that, but wasn't he the ailment in the cage? Wasn't he originally alive in the books?
I don't remember.
That was
the
guy in the mining town who was dead in the cage that Matt was going for the stones for.
Right, and Tom tells him who he is, that he's an ailment, and suddenly Matt realizes that Rand has the same shocking height and red hair Dun, 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 dun.
He's Scottish, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Without the accent.
Yeah, because that woman, the 9-month pregnant woman fighting warrior was pretty impressive. Let me tell you, that was
this could be good. Wait till you see them when they're not 9 months pregnant.
Yeah, that was very interesting, and it took me by surprise. I did not expect it to turn out to be that. Oh, that's Rand's mom, and that's his foster dad there.
But then going back to the Tinkers, you have the opposite side of the coin of the Tinkers. You got the White Cloaks, who are they're the zealots. They're the religious zealots of, if you're not the way we like it, you're against the light, and we will kill you.
One of the things that kind of gets me is I don't understand. Is there a political order in this world? Are there kings? Is there governments?
Yes.
Because
absolutely.
That's what Shelley was talking about earlier. The city that we miss, we see that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, the best we could say without getting too much spoiler is that the Two Rivers is a province of the Kingdom of Andor, and we meet the queen and everything like that. So
okay. So because the thing that gets me is like, so who's in charge here? So you got the Aes Sedai, who seem to be fairly powerful, and they rule this city, or at least they're the most prominent. Something about that city.
Tarvalon.
Tarvalon. Thank you. And then we have these White Cloaks who, if they encounter an Aes Sedai on the road, they are going to kill her. And so what authority do they have to do what they're doing? And it's kind of are they like from a church, or so, it's very sort of up in the air, and you get the feeling that they're kind of an Inquisition sort of thing.
Crusader.
Yeah.
Again, religious zealot. Yeah.
But apolitical in the sense that they don't belong to a single political organization.
And they have their own city also, the way the Aes Sedai have Tarvalon or Tarvalon. What was the name of their city? Was it Amador?
That's
Armordor,
right.
something
Amador
starting with an A.
Yeah.
So, but I will say that I was not expecting. I was young when I read these books, and I don't remember the violence being quite so vivid in my mind as much as the relationships of the characters. So when they introduce the Trollocs, I was like, oh, that's a little worse than I expected. And the Fade, the Mirjal, those scared the bejeebies out of me. And then episode 2 opens with the Children of the Light and the questioner with the hands. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can watch this. It's too violent.
Right. Well, isn't that the benefit of books versus shows, right? We love to see it on screen and made real, but a book, when you read a book, it's only as violent as your imagination makes it, or only as explicit.
I want to say that Robert Jordan does understate the violence quite a bit. He talks about that the questioners are very violent. He talks about that the White Cloaks will kill any Aes Sedai they find, but he doesn't get as graphic.
He doesn't describe it. Yeah,
he doesn't revel in anything. He revels in the lore, but not in the gore. He doesn't even revel in the sexuality. There are instances of it, but it's not like most of them are plot related and they don't take a long time. Like, you're not sitting there for pages going, oh my gosh, why am I still reading this?
Right.
Again, George R. R.
It's
Martin.
more like an aside or a mention, and this happened, and we're over here with the action or the dialogue.
Yep.
So
right. Yeah.
And there's points that it fits in because, of course, these characters are going to get into relationships, and he talks about the fact that they're going to do what people in relationships do.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And where applicable, some of the characters are driven by baser instincts, and it's shown that they are baser instincts. So some of the Forsaken, since we talked about them already anyway, some of the Forsaken are like chief of lust, basically. And so, the cardinal sins are kind of brought out on display with some of these characters.
Yeah, can I think of a Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood?
Yep.
So kind of like those characters, the bad guys in there. But so you see all those different elements, and then you got Penn and Fane, who's just evil.
I thought that was perfectly done, actually.
Which one was Penn and Fane? Just remind me.
The merchant that appears in the Two Rivers at the beginning, and then at the end helps the Dark Friends. I knew
he was a bad guy when I saw him in that first episode.
I hate to say, as my first thought when I found out when they said who he was, it's like, excuse me, but they cast a black guy for that.
Oh,
I mean, because knowing the issues of racism and political correctness in our culture
I did
today.
not notice that first. I think for me, the first thing I noticed was that it was a very multicultural cast. And aside from Egwene, she was the only one that I really didn't have in my head as being of a multicultural racial ethnicity of any kind. It worked. Nynaeve, to me, it didn't have any problem with that at all. Perrin doesn't look the way I pictured Perrin. Matt's pretty
darn
good.
close.
He adapted it really well. Rand just had to be tall with red hair.
Yeah.
And the others we've already talked about. So,
well, don't get too attached to the actor who played Matt because he's not back for season 2. They've recast it.
What? Oh,
yeah.
Bummer.
There's
I wonder if that's why they cut the character out the way they did.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe that's, you were talking about Tom earlier. I was thinking maybe that's how they're going to get Tom back into it is when Matt rejoins them as well.
Well, maybe they're going to jump ahead to another part of Matt's story that we're not going to talk about because it's a spoiler. Maybe they're going to bring that element in sooner in season 2
that would make
than
sense.
we might have thought. Because then we can get the dice rattling in his head. I love the dice in his head.
So, just to let people know that they're right now, as we release this, record this, they're filming season 2, and it's due to wrap up filming in February 2022. So
oh, cool. So we about a year after the first season comes out, we could have the second season.
yeah, my guess is the fall of 2022. We should see season 2.
And in the meantime, we can go watch all those wonderful bonus videos and the behind the scenes looks. And
yeah, now I'm gonna have to go grab my Amazon account again.
I'm the same way. I'm like, wait, there's more? What?
I'm watching it on my Kindle Fire, so I can tap it and see all the trivia pop up on the sides. So if you've got that feature, take advantage of it. It's really good. And then if you still want more after that, go grab the books. So
books are on my list.
A very long hold list on my library.
Yeah, I've got all the books. They're all sitting over. Most of them, except for one, the first 2 are sitting in the garage. So I'll have to run over and get all the rest of them.
Well, I have a love-hate relationship with this series. I recommend it to everybody, but I just can't. I don't know. I cannot. I am a person who has a lot of patience with books, and I read a lot. So for me to say that I couldn't get through a series, there was just something that I was not connecting with. And I really do think it was the fact that he doesn't have the thing I love about Tolkien is that he knows exactly where he's going with the story when he begins. And with Jordan, it feels like he has a general idea.
The characters are leading him.
Right.
There are some writers who the character leads them through the story, and other writers who know exactly where that character is going to go.
Bingo. And that's what Jordan feels like.
and one thing I kind of get the feeling, Jordan, he made the choice that he was going to show every part of his world. Because as you read through the books, you see all of his world. You see all of what he's got. I mean, there's nothing held back.
There are writers who are world builders primarily, like that. Their love is to build the world and place stories in it. Tolkien, Stephen Sterling, S.M. Sterling, Brandon Sanderson, Robert Jordan. And that's by the way, that's why Brandon Sanderson was such a great choice for this.
Yeah.
And that can be good, but sometimes they get so in love with their world that they're wanting to wander off into did you know that the caravan economy over in this part of the world is very interesting? That's nice, but that's not the story.
it gets into some of that to Rand's frustration. Let's just put it that way.
So there is that element that can pop up in that sort of storytelling, which is interesting.
I think one of the brilliant things about the authors that are really good at it, though, is that they leave more unsaid than said.
Yes. Tolkien, I always want to know what was just south of Gondor. Like, what was down there? We never got to see that. Like, Jackson.
But they talk about the Southerlings.
Yes. And what's east of Mordor? And, like, there's much more to that world. And we're left wanting, and that's fine.
The wizards are mentioned. See, that's the thing is like every single question you could have about Tolkien, it's because he cleverly dropped a hint.
Yes.
And left you imagining that thing. And with Jordan, a lot of times I feel like he couldn't drop a hint. Like he's like, oh yeah, there's this thing. Yeah, let's go like check it out, you know?
Yeah. It's
And by the way, can we just bring up one last group that we haven't talked about yet that we only saw for about 30 seconds? The Senchan. So at the end of the last one, it goes to black like it's going to credits, and then it's got this scene on the beach, and these boats are coming in with these channelers who are moving the water. They're moving the wind, the Senchan.
Okay.
And they're going to be big. They're very important going forward. Okay. And it's so cool the way they introduced them.
I was looking for the Statue of Liberty on the beach. They did it. Those crazy.
I wasn't sure about it until we saw the collars, and then I was like, oh my gosh, they went there already. It's
so the collars and the wristband. I don't know. Should we keep the spoiler about eating them?
Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
Okay, we'll leave it alone. Other than to say
let them be in suspense too.
That they are a very interesting addition to the story at this point. Let's just put it that way.
Very good. Awesome. Any other things we want to say about this? I had more notes that I haven't got to, but we're already an hour in, so I don't want to hold you guys too long. But it's good discussion so far. Any other notes, Father Corey?
All I can say is I want to go to, I think it was Hungary, and where they filmed this. The scenery is gorgeous. Yeah, all throughout. They picked some amazing shooting spots for all this scenery. It's just beautiful.
Thomas, any last notes?
I will say I like the bent that a lot of different producers are taking in making not the book series that it's based on, but it's not the book. And that I like that because it shows that they understand the series and that they're putting things together in a way that's logical and condensing the series into something reasonable, which is good. I like that they're doing that.
The two different art forms, books and movies or TV shows. Shelley?
I just want to say that where in the first episode, I wasn't really feeling it. I really changed my mind after I got past the Children of the Light in the hands. But I'm looking forward to season 2 now. I'm really curious how they're going to bring in characters I know need to be in this story. And they've done a really good job of establishing characters that I can connect with and want to follow. And I'm enjoying the costuming and the set, like y'all mentioned before. Yeah. I don't need to see another Trolloc, but
they were well done.
You'll see plenty of them.
They were well done.
Oh, darn.
Awesome. So what I want to say is sort of tangential. I really enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to season 2. I'm fascinated by the world that Jordan created and that they've interpreted for the screen. This series actually gives me hope for the Tolkien series, which is not a reboot of the Lord of the Rings, people. It is not a reboot of the Lord of the Rings. Stop saying that. Everything's a reboot nowadays. No, but it gives me hope that it's not the same people creating it, but Amazon has spent a lot of money on both of these properties and clearly does not want to alienate the fan bases. They haven't alienated the Wheel of Time fans, and they really don't want to alienate the Tolkien fans. And so it gives me hope that they're not going to do damage to that. My plan when that series eventually comes out someday is we're going to have a whole show on StarQuest. We're going to revive the Secrets of Middle-earth and do a episode by episode on that because that's just worthwhile to do.
Can I also say, tying into that, Dom, is there's still the merger of MGM and Amazon that's underway that they're trying to get done. This brings out big time hope for me as a Stargate fan because Amazon has kind of made squawks that they want to do a new Stargate series once they get MGM bought up.
Right. It doesn't mean that it's everything that they do is going to be touched with gold necessarily, but they did such a good job with this that I'm hopeful of their other things that they've clearly spent a lot. I mean, literally $1 billion they spent to get Tolkien. It's the most money ever spent to acquire a property.
So Bezos just opened up his wallet and pulled out his pocket change, right?
Yeah, basically, right.
He said, I actually want this one, guys. Let's go.
I'll pay for this one myself.
Yes, we'll take one less launch of the Shepherd one.
I do wish that they would make these just a touch longer. 8 episodes didn't feel like enough to put it all into. I wish they'd done 12. I'll just say that. If it had been on a network television, it would have been a longer, more drawn out drama.
26
hour
episodes.
long.
That's my primary complaint about most of the streaming shows these days, whether it's Mandalorian or The Witcher or this or whatever, is they're all 6, 8, or 10 episodes. It's not, it doesn't feel like enough. It's longer than a movie. I get that. But like Hawkeye was 6 episodes. Come on.
I mean, there's 53 chapters in this book. I think you need more than 8. I don't think you need 53. But
the problem is they're still building on that Netflix model where it was dump them all at one time. And you couldn't get people to binge more than 8 hours at a time.
Right.
And they need to get over that because they're doing these weekly releases. And if they really want this stuff to stick, like, I mean, if we had a run of 12 to 26 of these, we probably would have picked up a weekly show for it because it's
weekly,
long enough.
Bi-weekly at most, or at least,
yeah.
And Dom, by the way, there is one series that we really do want to be shorter. That's streaming.
Yes,
Star Trek Discovery.
Yes, that one could be. Yeah, I 26 is, I know, is too much to ask for these days. But longer than 8, a dozen episodes, I think, is really the sweet spot now. And I think, I know it's expensive and it takes time, and I get all that, and they have all the special effects and all that sort of stuff. And we are already waiting a year or more before we can get the next season. And so that's one of the things. If we can draw it out for 12 weeks, 3 months while you're filming it and producing it, and then it just, I don't know. I'm not a studio executive, so what do I know?
That being said, they did a really good job with taking a very complex first book and putting it down into 8 episodes, in my opinion. I mean, I think they did a really good job.
And Amazon did its job of wanting to sell me a book, which is I want to go out and get the Wheel of Time series.
There you go. That's the real reason.
That's the real reason.
At least the first 5.
Yes. Yeah, right. So far. I mean, who knows? Maybe the 11th one is like gold and we just haven't read it yet. But all right, let's wrap it up there. Before we go, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of movies and TV shows, including Kathleen F., Tom L., Daniel D., Kelly B., and Max S. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the secrets of movies and TV shows and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of Wheel of Time Season 1? Or how they did adapting the books to the show? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/secrets or the StarQuest Facebook page, or send an email to secrets@sqpn.com. Until next time, Shelley Kelly, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Wheel of Time.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
And Thomas Senator, thank you too.
It was great to be here.
And Father Corey Stika, thank you as well.
Oh, my pleasure, and thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the secrets of movies and TV shows on StarQuest.